Welcome to the Communicating Capital podcast, where finance and communication get a fresh perspective. Hosted by a dynamic team of women in the industry, we're here to redefine the conversation with candid, no-nonsense interviews featuring top finance executives, communication experts, and industry leaders. With a focus on clarity and real-world impact, we make the complex world of finance digestible and relatable. So whether you're a seasoned professional or you're just interested in our world, we're here to help you navigate the space in new and exciting ways. And today, I actually have someone that I've admired for quite a long time, Scott Gordon. He's the president and co-founder of Core IR and PR. And Core has been a firm that's been delivering top-tier investor relations, capital markets advisory, and public relations services since 2009. He's built an incredible career and an incredible team over the years. His expertise spans everything from capital formation to crisis management, and he's a true leader when it comes to fostering collaboration and driving success for his clients. Scott, welcome to Communicating Capital.
Thank you so much for having me, Jessica. I'm really pleased to be here.
You've had quite an impressive career, starting on the trading floors to working in investment management and then co-founding Core IR and PR. Can you take us back to the moment when you decided to launch Core? What was your vision for the firm and how has it evolved over the years? We do want you to actually take us back all the way to when you were working on the trading floors to now, so we're excited to hear.
I started my career as a position clerk on the New York Mercantile Exchange in the crude oil and the heating oil trading pits, and worked my way up onto a trading desk at Shearson Lehman Hutton, and then went to work for a hedge fund manager named Louis Bacon at Moore Capital Management, and had an extensive career on Wall Street for the next 15 years, where I ended up as head of global markets trading for a group of global macro-based and systematic-based funds that were managing about $300 million in assets under management, and was doing trade execution and risk management for a number of other hedge fund managers as well. And then went over to the sell side, worked at Smith Barney, and was on a trading desk in their futures division. And then I was a market maker I was a currency market maker. And then at some point I had decided that, I had really run the gamut of things that I had wanted to do on Wall Street, and had made a decision to kind of pivot into financial analysis and modeling, and was looking at building trading systems and analytics for trading systems. And that kind of bridged into me developing all the sales and marketing collateral. And then in successive roles that I had kind of in a number of other things, I found that I was really assuming this role of head of communications in addition to head of sales and marketing, because I was developing all the collateral and all the website copy and all of these other things. And so I reached a point in those next few years where I had decided that since I was really doing all of that writing, why not start a corporate communications firm? And so that was the beginning of a firm that I started, which was called the Mighty Writer Company, because I was the mighty writer.
I love that. I actually love that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
How did I not know that?
Yeah. And so I was the mighty writer, and this was like in '06, and I went from 0 clients to about 15 clients very quickly, and was editing short stories for a collection of short stories that Dennis Leary had a hand in, and some other celebrities. And I was ghostwriting a book, and I was doing all kinds of corporate communication stuff. And I did that for a number of years, and it was pretty successful until the recession of like the financial crisis of '08 came. And then I was kind of like the earliest discretionary spending to go from a lot of my corporate accounts, and found myself kind of, wondering, all right, well, is this going to go, or what's going to happen? And I had met my now business partner and co-founder of Core IR, Chuck Bennett, and I'd known him for a number of years, and he had been running a company that was providing, it was called RADA, and it was providing registered representatives with prepaid legal defense in the event of an arbitration. And I'd built this amazing network of companies and broker-dealers and brokers, just this giant network of attorneys and brokers all over the country. And so one day a friend of his came to him and said, I'm setting up a roadshow. Maybe you could make some introductions to some of your relationships. And I've got this corporate presentation, which really needs some work. Can you do something with it? And he sent it to me. And I tore it apart and I put it back together and they did the roadshow and it was a great success. And he called me after and he said, I have an idea for a company. Come on in, I want to talk. And that meeting was the beginning of what became Core Prominence LLC, which exists today as that is the founding company, and Core IR is what we DBA as, but Core Prominence is the entity. And that was the beginning of Core IR back in 2009. So it was just Chuck and I. I was doing all the corporate communications. Chuck was doing all the investor engagement and roadshow stuff. And, we were just two guys who were cook, bottle washer, and dishwasher and, running this tiny little business. And then it started to grow. And we hired a beautiful man who has since passed away, Scott Arnold, who was our first employee and our first partner beyond Chuck and I. And then it kind of grew from there. So Scott was a road warrior. He was, bringing clients around on road shows all over the country and doing all kinds of fun stuff in that realm. And then it kind of expanded into, as we kind of gained momentum, we kind of built this model where every 2 or 3 clients we got, we would bring in an equity analyst or a specialist in IR or somebody who had, deep expertise in communications or some aspect of the business. And we kind of kept that ratio going where we were really proud of the fact that we had this group of people that were able to really cluster around managing a particular client. And that exists even to today, where our approach in managing our clients is what we call a clustered approach. But we'll talk about that later. Anyway, that's how the business all kind of came together and was kind of this beautiful blend of my background, which really was deep Wall Street and deep communications, and shareholder value analysis, which was part of the modeling stuff that we had been doing. So I really got a broad education that I could apply into serving clients, but also in terms of, understanding how to build the business with the service elements that were going to be relevant. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I love hearing the story from start to finish because you read stuff online, and I've obviously done research on you, on Core, on your team, especially ahead of today. And you don't really know that or fully understand the backstory behind it, the human element behind it, all the different loops and things you had to learn along the way. And so I love that. It's inspiring. And I just want to learn more. And I'm going to dive into your team for sure a little bit later on in today's little interview that we have here. But with regard to IR, I do want to talk about that aspect of everything because those that are listening in do have an interest in investor relations, especially for small and mid-sized companies, which we know IR can be definitely misunderstood depending on the way that they're looking at it. What do you think are the biggest misconceptions about IR and how do you help your clients navigate that?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions occurs in the C-suite because CEOs and management teams, CFOs are kind of indoctrinated into IR, into believing that it's this panacea for getting their stock price up, right? And so they're kind of caught in this need to have a balance in creating and preserving shareholder value and growing their companies, which as a public company, the goal is to be obviously growing and profitable at some point. And in the micro and small cap arenas, there are many companies that face the common need for and an ongoing need for continuing to raise capital. And so there's a challenge there in maintaining shareholder value and not devaluing, shareholders or diluting shareholders to the extent that that's possible. And so I think one of the biggest misconceptions is in kind of the C-suite believing that hiring an IR firm is going to be an instant panacea for, getting their stock price higher. Right. When in reality, the magic of IR is what happens when companies are demonstrating execution to the expectations that they've set with the street and with investors. What I mean by that is So quarterly reports and quarterly reporting is kind of the mechanism for when companies report on their previous quarter and set expectations for how things are proceeding according to annual plans or relative to expectations that they've set, and an opportunity to set new expectations. And so during the quarter that follows, the milestones and the things that the corporate developments that they're announcing are reflective of the execution relative to those expectations. IR really champions that process by effectively conveying how well the company is executing relative to those expectations, which give investors and analysts and participants that are following these companies the opportunity to establish some modeling and some perception of how those developments are impacting future valuation, and thus also creating this mechanism of building credibility for the company with investors and the street itself. And so it's that mechanism of building credibility that's really that's the success of IR. And so it's not nearly this, oh, I'm hiring an IR firm and they're going to get my stock price up. It's, oh, we're hiring an IR firm because they have expertise in how we can communicate our message to investors and analysts properly, and how we can engage with investors in a way that fosters confidence and fosters credibility, which are the things that will create the incentive for those participants to actually take portfolio positions and keep them and add to them. And so that's really kind of, in my view, the biggest thing, the biggest hurdle to overcome with those initial conversations with CEOs. It's to set the right expectations with them, because in many cases there are many players out there and many other firms and competing firms that are suggesting that there's this automatic process that's happening, and it's far from automatic. It's very intentional and strategic, and those are misconceptions, I think, that are fostered by other players in the market that may not, they may be going for the quick grab instead of kind of having a vision for the long term. And I think that that's what influences that misconception in some ways.
I love that you're talking about the fact that there needs to be a strategy. There needs to be some type of, going from point A to point B. It doesn't happen overnight. You have to build a good story. You have to execute on what you say you're going to do. And I feel like the same goes into public relations too, which I know you have so much experience in as well. And I know that can be often misunderstood as well. They're like, look, we'll hire you, and then tomorrow you're going to put us on CNBC, right? Or something of the sort. Can you speak a little bit on the misconceptions of PR when it comes to your clients and how we can work on that?
So we formed Core Public Relations about 3 years ago, when we identified a gap in public relations service providers and their ability to serve microcap companies, because most of the clients that we serve operate in the microcap and the small cap space, really with market caps of, let's say, $1.5 billion on down. And that can go down to 25 to 50 million even. I'd say the average we are in is probably somewhere between 500 and 750 million in terms of market cap. And we have higher and lower. And so public relations firms have, the bigger firms don't necessarily have the nimbleness or the experience or the expertise operating within the microcap space, because they just really haven't worked with companies in that category,
right.
At least in my experience. And they certainly have experience with bigger public companies that they serve, but that's a wholly different animal. And so we saw an opportunity to add an element of media engagement initially to kind of address exactly what you just said, right? Companies have, every CEO I know thinks that they have the best thing ever, and that they belong on CNBC and Fox News and in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post and every tier one media outlet out there, when the reality is that they really need to build a credible case for how to get on those into those media channels, especially because CNBC, for example, won't even look at a company that's less than a particular market cap unless it's some seriously germane topical story that is, deeply, deeply resonating with what's in the news now or at that time. And so the growth of our public relations agency has really thrived in our ability to help our clients to understand that our expertise in the microcap space has translated into building a public relations agency with that competency. And the success of it, of both, really, when I'm asked how do you define successful IR? Well, it's kind of building on the dual capabilities of PR and IR in executing strategies that allow companies to reach both a broad base of investors, but also the public at large, and to build a presence and an awareness out there in the world that grows from things like them growing reputation around being thought leaders, for example, which is not something particularly germane in IR activities, if you will, right? IR activities are more focused on making introductions to portfolio managers who may or may not be particularly interested that a company is a thought leader in its space in the similar context of how a public relations effort is happening and making that happen. Of course, they want to understand that a company is a thought leader, but the public relations activities around that are very specific to making, the tactical choices that allow that to occur. And so the misconception or the misunderstood aspects of how PR relates to investor relations in this micro and small cap arena are, everybody's got the greatest thing ever and they belong in the highest tiers of media. And how could they not want them? And so that's a big, big challenge for us to overcome. And we do that by bringing them media opportunities and media engagement opportunities and other opportunities that diversify their exposure into a broad base of channels that may not really be tier one, but the need for tier one kind of goes away because they're so busy with the media that is germane for them. And that's the difference, if you will, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. It makes sense. And I feel like you said that so eloquently and understandably so. I mean, we work with similar clients. Some of them, of course, have the story already built. They've been working with whatever trade publications. There's a local story, there's something, and then all of a sudden it becomes national or it becomes mainstream. But it really just depends on the story that we're building and the news that we're getting and what's going on in the market today. It's the news now, as you were mentioning, and how to fit our clients in there accordingly. I'm going to quickly pivot to something more about you, Scott. And so I saw something on LinkedIn that you recently posted, and you talked about the power of collaboration and mutual growth and how true success is not only about winning individually, but elevating the entire industry. Can you expand a little bit on that philosophy and how it guides the way that you lead CORE?
It's funny. I have, another saying, and we recently posted it, which I thought was really good. You can't compete with me. I want all of us to win.
I love that. I love that.
And I really mean it because, we operate in this it's a very small and a very insular community of participants in the investment banking world with analysts and bankers, auditors, accounting firms, transfer agents, all of these different players that all are operating to serve the private and public company ecosystem and IR firms, especially, and PR firms, of course. And so, we've kind of always had a philosophy that we need to work together. And I can't tell you how many IR firms we've actually co-led with clients where we're sharing responsibilities. And that playing nice in the sandbox has come back to help us it's exposed us to other opportunities. It's exposed them to other opportunities. It has created a culture of cooperation and complementary activities and tactics to the degree that, we know where we're good and we know where our partners are good too. And so we're very willing to bring them in where their competencies are going to complement the client's needs. And so that is an aspect of our culture. We embody it in the relationships we foster with all of those participants, but we also drive it deeply within the culture of our firm, where all of our team, which is now a team of almost 28, I think it's 28, they're steeped in it because they're involved in it on a day-to-day basis, right? Look, I don't have a job. I have a business, and it's kind of a way of life in a way, right? It's the incarnation of everything that I love, from writing to client engagement to solving, complex challenges in communications and dealing with crises and managing things that, and being exposed to companies that are truly innovative and doing amazing things, and attending conferences. And I've been a regular player at cocktail parties at many financial conferences. A lot of my fan base out there was grown from being the entertainment for those. And so I literally have infused my lifestyle into this, and as have my partners and our employees, in a way that this aspect is really, really a part of our culture now, and it's really rewarding. It really is. So it's something we love, and we love about the business.
Love that. And for our listeners that don't know, Scott is actually he plays music. So when he is at these cocktail parties, at conferences, he is playing the guitar, and it is absolutely wonderful. So he's saying entertainment, and we all will now know that it's him playing music, and it's beautiful. I love that you merge those things. I'm actually going to pivot back to just the way that you work with clients. I know that you work with a ton of different companies, whether they're, you just said what their main sizes might be, but I feel like they're at different growth stages. Perhaps it's a biotech company that's going through phase 1 or phase 2 trials, or perhaps they just finished a phase 3 trial. How do you tailor your approach for different types of companies, whether they're pre-IPO, they're newly public, or they're going through such things such as FDA trials or some big milestone moment?
So that's a great question. We absolutely tailor our delivery of our approach to delivering a set of services, because pre-IPO companies certainly are, they have some very specific requirements to get to that point of getting listed. And newly public companies certainly are in need of kind of more intensive aftermarket support versus more established companies that certainly have a need for continued support, but it's different. So we've established working groups and different working groups within our firm that have varying competencies, right? So pre-IPO, we have a capital markets advisory team led by Brett Shapiro, who is, just a veteran capital markets, former banker, and just an amazing resource in helping companies to identify the right partners, the right resources, and the right strategies to both raise capital or position themselves for an IPO or other, secondaries or other types of transactions. And so we also have 6 former senior equity research analysts on staff that really fit into that mold of being able to tailor how to help a company position for an IPO, for example, or for, once public, how to begin that process of courting analysts or engaging with analysts or developing narrative that is going to resonate with the street. And so really it's just kind of bringing together our practice heads. We have Jules Abraham, who heads up communications, Katie Waldenberg, who heads up public relations. So it starts there, right, with an analysis with our practice leaders. And Chuck kind of heads up our investor engagement and client management activities and biz dev as well. So it starts with kind of the practice leaders assessing and then bringing in the rest of the supportive team as these things evolve. And in many cases, we're working with lots of companies that are pre-IPO, on their way to IPO, and our services mixes are from the moment we're proposing them, it's here's the pre-IPO activity set and services set, and here's the post-IPO activity set in that sense. And then for other more established companies, it's really, okay, well, here's where you are. I find that companies are somewhere on the continuum of we've just raised capital, we don't need to raise capital for some period of time, or we're evaluating our options and making a decision about that, right? And so even in that category of services, there's some really fine tailoring that needs to happen in order to help them get the resources they need in order to be able to make the decisions that are going to be best for them.
It must be so incredibly exciting to work with companies that are pre-IPO and actually take them from that point to the actual IPO and post-IPO. I mean, I feel like that's what it's all about, and seeing the companies succeed and helping them along that way and watching them go up and down and how you can best support them along. I mean, that's incredible. That's totally incredible.
It's exceptionally rewarding. And it's stressful, but it all comes together. And when it does, it's like this beautiful orchestration. It's funny, I just turned 60 and my birthday was on Sunday. And one of the presents I got, so a lot of my friends know I'm a musician and a singer, and I have a band and do all kinds of fun stuff with music. And one of the presents that someone gave me was the wand that
like a conductor.
Yes, the conductor uses. And so his card says, conduct your life. Okay. And, it was a really, really, just a beautiful present. And that's very symbolic of what we do at Core, right? We are conductors orchestrating this, this orchestra of specialists and experts in their specialties of investor engagement, capital markets advisory, communications, and public relations, and orchestrating them to bring the resources to bear that allow us to really make a difference. And we do. So it's amazing.
Love that. And Scott, so I'm going to pivot back to Core's core business. We're talking about IR. We're talking about PR. I just saw that you launched Core Digital. Can you talk a little bit about that and tell us what that means?
Yes, that's very exciting for us. I think what we found is that social media channels have evolved to become another means by which companies can engage with investors and the public, obviously with the public, but with the investing public. And we found that there was real demand for companies that needed help in leveraging these channels because they don't have the internal competency or the wherewithal and the knowledge base to employ an approach to content creation and content dissemination that takes advantage of the nuances between LinkedIn and X or Facebook or Instagram, and how to bring those to bear with all of the force that those platforms offer in terms of digital marketing capabilities also. So it's not just, hey, let's put content up in a channel. It's let's do that within the confines of an architected strategy that leverages digital marketing to help promote that content across a myriad of resources and other channels. And so it's very, very compelling when companies can take their editorial calendars and the corporate milestone and corporate development announcements that they're always putting out and leverage that content in multiple ways, not just in in singular dimensional ways, but in multidimensional ways across all of these channels. And so Core Digital was formed with that intention and has been highly successful in helping companies to take advantage of these channels in ways that are compliant, right? That's a huge part of this is, doing social and digital within the confines of Regulation FD with an eye towards how regulators are viewing and analyzing how the use of these things is happening, which is a really, really important part of this, because in some ways, the advent of finfluencers and other elements within this ecosphere are very much kind of this wild, wild west thing that's happening. It certainly has the eye of regulators, and we're not really in that aspect of it. It's really leveraging the social channels per se, because I don't think that the finfluencer realm has been sufficiently vetted yet to be, something that is particularly mainstream. So there's certainly, firms out there that do leverage it, and, that's all fine. But we're really focused on the digital marketing and the social media channel management aspects of it.
I feel like we could do an entire episode on that with you and perhaps somebody on your team, which is making me think that maybe we need to do a Scott Gordon part 2, because we're coming up on time. And I want to ask you, just before we wrap up, do you have any final advice for companies that are looking to strengthen their IR or PR strategies, or if they're looking to work with Core, any final advice or any final thoughts?
I think that it's really important for companies to understand the world where they live. I find many C-suites thinking that they're deserving of the attention of, let's say, a microcap CEO is deserving of the attention of analysts that are covering small cap company. The one aspect that I think companies really need to grasp is that their professional resources that they bring in IR and PR are steeped in understanding how to leverage where they live in their ecosystem, and that they need to trust that we're going to bring them where they need to go while always striving to look to swim upstream.
Right.
But I think that's really, it's incumbent upon us to help shape their expectations so that they operate where they are in the best way that they can, and not be disappointed that they're not getting what they believe they should get with expectations that aren't really aligned with the reality of where they are. And that's something I think that we bring to the table early and often to ensure that we have that alignment. The other aspect, I think, is finding the right partner in IR and PR with that depth of knowledge and the practical experience to drive their activities to success. And I think that we are among the elite few that have crafted and curated a team that brings that to bear. And so that's a really important aspect of it too.
Scott, I can see why all your clients and people like to work with you. You're incredibly knowledgeable, you're kind. And for everybody that is listening in, and if they've made it this far through the episode, just so everyone knows, Scott has been so kind to myself, to Elevate. He's been supporting Communicating Capital. He's a good person. And so I understand why and I've seen the work that he does. So I'm just impressed, and I want to hear more. And I think we need to do a part 2 because I know we're up on time. So I'm going to invite you back. Maybe we can do it in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, let's do it.
But so far, thank you so much for joining us today, Scott. Really appreciate it.
I really appreciate the opportunity. I really, I love what you guys are doing, and, keep up the great work. And thanks again for the opportunity. I'm so grateful, and look forward to our next visit.
I'm looking forward to it too. And for our listeners that want to learn more about Core IR and PR and soon Core Digital, or connect with Scott, be sure to check out the links in our show notes. As always, thank you for joining us on Communicating Capital.